Daniel sat at the small wooden table in his kitchen, staring at a stack of unpaid bills. The morning sun slipped through the old curtains, making the faded wallpaper look even duller. He rubbed his eyes and let out a long sigh. It wasn't that he wasn't working hard, he was. Every day he spent long hours at the auto repair shop, fixing cars, lifting heavy tires, and wiping sweat from his forehead in the sweltering heat. But no matter how much he worked, the money never seemed enough. Across the table sat Liam, his 10-year-old son, munching on a bowl of cereal. His curly hair was messy from sleep, and his school uniform hung a little loose because Daniel had bought it one size bigger, hoping it would last another year. "Dad," Liam said with his mouth half full, "do I need to take lunch money today?" Daniel hesitated. He looked at his wallet lying near the bills. There were only a few crumpled notes inside. He forced a smile. "Yeah, buddy, don't worry. I'll put some in your bag." Liam nodded happily and went back to eating. He was a bright kid, always smiling, always talking about superheroes and football games. Daniel often wondered how his son managed to stay so cheerful despite the struggles around them. Maybe that was the beauty of being young. You didn't see the weight adults carried. Once Liam was off to school, Daniel sat in silence. The house felt too quiet. It had been that way since his wife passed away 3 years ago. She had been the heart of the home, the warmth that filled the rooms. Now it was just him and Liam, and every day felt like a battle to hold things together. Daniel picked up one of the bills and stared at the numbers. The rent was creeping higher, groceries cost more, and Liam was growing fast. Shoes, books, school trips, everything needed money. He leaned back and rubbed his tired face. He didn't like admitting it, but he was falling behind. His eyes shifted toward the spare bedroom at the end of the hallway. It had been empty for years, ever since his brother stayed there briefly before moving away. The thought had crossed his mind many times. Read it out. Extra money could mean less stress, maybe even a chance to save for Liam's future. But the idea of letting a stranger live under the same roof made him uneasy. That evening, after dinner, Daniel finally spoke to Liam about it. They sat together on the worn-out sofa, the TV flickering with a cartoon show in the background. "Hey, champ," Daniel said. "How would you feel if someone stayed here with us for a while? Like, maybe renting the spare room?" Liam tilted his head. "Like a roommate?" Daniel chuckled softly. "Something like that. Just someone nice who needs a place to stay. It could help us out a bit." Liam thought for a second. "As long as they're not mean, or loud, or take my cereal." Daniel laughed, ruffling his son's hair. "I'll make sure of that." The next day, Daniel put up a small ad online. He didn't expect much, maybe a few calls from people who wouldn't even show up. But within 2 days, his phone buzzed with a message. A college student was looking for a quiet place to stay. Her message was polite and straightforward. She said she wanted somewhere simple, close to campus, and safe. Daniel read it twice. Something about the way she wrote seemed genuine. He agreed to meet her the following evening. When the doorbell rang, Daniel felt a little nervous. He opened the door and found a young woman standing there with a small backpack slung over her shoulder. She wore jeans, a plain shirt, and sneakers. Her smile was shy but warm. "Hi, I'm Emily," she said softly. Daniel nodded. "Come in." She stepped inside, looking around the modest living room. Daniel led her down the hallway and showed her the spare room. The walls were plain, the bed simple, and the window open to the backyard. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and quiet. "It's perfect," Emily said, almost instantly. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You sure? It's not much." She smiled again, her eyes kind. "It's exactly what I need." Liam peeked from behind the sofa, curious about the visitor. Emily noticed and crouched down a little, giving him a gentle wave. "Hey there," Liam blinked, then slowly waved back. "Hi." That small moment eased Daniel's worry. If Liam felt comfortable, maybe this could actually work. They sat at the table and discussed the rent. Emily agreed without hesitation, even offering to pay in advance. Daniel was surprised but didn't ask too many questions. Something about her presence felt honest, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a small weight lifting off his shoulders. After she left, promising to move in by the weekend, Daniel leaned against the doorframe. He could hear Liam whispering from the living room, She seems nice, Dad. Daniel smiled faintly. Yeah, she does. That night, as he tucked Liam into bed, Daniel thought about the changes ahead. He wasn't sure how it would turn out living with a stranger under the same roof. But maybe this was the start of something better. Maybe, just maybe, life was about to feel a little less heavy. As Daniel lay in his own bed later, listening to the hum of the old ceiling fan, a flicker of hope stirred in him. For months, he had been drowning in worries, but now, with this one decision, he felt like he had given himself and his son a small chance. He didn't know it yet, but the girl who was about to move into his home carried a secret that would change everything. The weekend arrived quicker than Daniel expected. He found himself cleaning the spare room with more care than usual. He dusted the shelves, fixed the squeaky window latch, and even patched a small crack on the wall that had been there for years. Liam followed him around, pretending to help, though most of his time was spent bouncing on the bed and asking 100 questions. Do you think she likes cartoons? What if she doesn't like pizza? Dad, what if she's allergic to dogs? Liam rattled off, despite the fact that they didn't even have a dog. Daniel shook his head, chuckling. Relax, champ. She's just going to be a tenant, not your babysitter. Still, he couldn't deny that he was a little nervous too. Living with someone new was a big change. On Saturday afternoon, Emily showed up with 2 medium-sized suitcases and a backpack. That was all she carried. No expensive luggage, no fancy decorations, just the basics. Daniel found it unusual, but he didn't comment. Welcome, he said, carrying one of the bags inside. Emily looked around, her eyes scanning the house with quiet curiosity. Liam popped out from behind the doorframe and grinned at her. Hi again. Hi, she replied warmly, bending slightly to meet his gaze. You must be Liam. He nodded proudly. Yep, and you're Emily. I remember. Daniel stood back, watching the exchange. He noticed how natural she was with kids, no hesitation, no awkwardness. That, to him, was a good sign. Once her things were settled in the spare room, Emily stepped into the kitchen where Daniel was pouring coffee. She hesitated a moment, as if unsure whether she should ask, then said, I know I'm just renting a room, but if there are house rules, I'd like to know them. Daniel appreciated her straightforwardness. Not really rules, just respect the space, no late-night parties, and if you're cooking, don't burn the place down. He cracked a small smile. Emily laughed softly. I can promise that much. It didn't take long for her presence to blend into the rhythm of the house. She wasn't loud, she wasn't messy, and she never treated the place like it was temporary. In fact, she often joined Liam at the table, asking about his school projects, or sat quietly in the living room reading a book while Daniel watched the evening news. One evening, Liam dragged out his math homework, groaning dramatically. Dad, can you help me? Fractions are evil. Daniel scratched his head, staring at the worksheet as if it were a foreign language. He'd been good at fixing cars, but math had never been his strong suit. Before he could say anything, Emily leaned over from her chair. Want me to take a look? She asked. Liam's face brightened. Yes, please. Within minutes, she had explained fractions in a way that made Liam nod eagerly. He actually solved a few problems on his own, his earlier frustration gone. Daniel sat back, quietly impressed. Later that night, when Liam was asleep, Daniel found himself saying, You're good with him. Emily smiled softly. He's a smart kid. Just needs patience. Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that struck Daniel. Patience. It was something he often felt he lacked. Rushing from work to home, worrying about money, barely finding time to breathe. Emily seemed to bring a calmness into the house that had been missing for years. Still, Daniel couldn't ignore the little things that puzzled him. Emily carried herself with grace, the kind that wasn't common for students scraping by. Her posture, her speech, even the way she handled herself, it all hinted at a background different from what she showed. But Daniel respected her privacy. If she wanted to keep her life to herself, that was her right. One Sunday morning, Daniel decided to cook pancakes. The smell of butter and syrup filled the kitchen, drawing Emily out of her room. She looked half asleep, but smiled when she saw the stack on the table. Smells amazing, she said, grabbing a plate. Liam, already with syrup on his chin, grinned. Dad's pancakes are famous. Emily laughed, sitting down. For the first time in a long time, the kitchen felt full again, like a family breakfast. The sound of Liam's chatter, Emily's soft laughter, and the clink of forks on plates brought a warmth Daniel hadn't realized he missed so deeply. As the days turned into weeks, a rhythm formed. Emily would head out for classes, come back in the evening, and sometimes share stories about campus life. Daniel listened, half interested but mostly glad to see Liam so engaged. The boy adored her, often asking if she could play board games or listen to his endless stories. But beneath the comfort of this new arrangement, Daniel still carried doubts. He caught Emily once at the grocery store, paying for something with a sleek, shiny card that looked nothing like the standard student debit cards he'd seen. When he asked about it, she brushed it off quickly. "Oh, it's just a backup card from my dad," she said casually, changing the subject. Daniel didn't press, but the thought lingered. Who exactly was this young woman living under his roof? Yet, every time he considered it, he remembered the way she sat with Liam, helping him read, or the way she washed dishes without being asked, or how she never made him feel like less of a man despite his modest home and simple life. One late night, after finishing paperwork, Daniel walked into the living room. Emily was asleep on the couch, a textbook resting on her chest, the lamp still on. He stood there for a moment, watching the calm rise and fall of her breathing. Something inside him stirred a mix of gratitude and unease. She wasn't just another tenant. She was becoming part of their lives. And deep down, Daniel knew that meant whatever secrets Emily was carrying, sooner or later, they would find their way into his small, fragile world. The days rolled by, and slowly, what had started as a simple rental agreement began to feel like something much more natural. Emily was no longer just a tenant. She had slipped into the rhythms of the house as though she had always belonged there. Daniel noticed it in small things. The sound of her footsteps in the hallway no longer felt out of place. The smell of her tea brewing in the evenings mixed with the aroma of his late-night coffee. Her laughter gentle but steady filled corners of the house that had been too quiet for too long. Liam noticed it even more. For him, Emily was not just someone who rented a room. She was his audience, his teacher, and sometimes even his teammate in board games. One Friday evening, Daniel came home to find Liam and Emily sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by sheets of paper. At first glance, it looked like schoolwork, but when he leaned closer, he realized they were building a giant paper castle out of folded sheets. "Dad," Liam shouted excitedly, holding up a crooked paper tower. "Look, we're making a castle. Emily showed me how to fold it so it doesn't fall." Emily looked up, her hands carefully shaping another piece. "We're going for the tallest castle in history." Daniel smiled, a rare softness touching his usually tired eyes. He set down his toolbox, crouched on the floor, and picked up a sheet of paper. "All right then, show me where I can help." That night, the three of them sat there, building towers that eventually collapsed in a heap of laughter. For Daniel, moments like this were priceless. He could see Liam glowing with joy, something that had been missing since his mother's passing. Later, when Liam had gone to bed, Daniel stood in the doorway watching Emily quietly gather the leftover papers. She stacked them neatly, humming under her breath. It wasn't anything grand, but in that moment, Daniel realized how much lighter the house felt since she'd moved in her still. Questions tugged at the back of his mind. Who was this girl who seemed so at ease in their simple home? The next morning, Daniel got his answer in the most unexpected way. He had taken Liam to soccer practice while Emily stayed behind to study. On their way back, Daniel decided to stop at the grocery store. As they walked down the aisle, he spotted Emily near the counter. She was speaking on the phone, her voice lower than usual, her posture tense. "I told you. I'm fine. Please don't send anyone. I don't need bodyguards here," she said firmly before noticing Daniel and Liam approaching. The phone slipped into her pocket as her face lit up with a smile. "Hey, you guys shopping too?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Bodyguards?" Emily froze for a fraction of a second before laughing lightly. "Oh, just a joke with a friend. Don't worry about it." She quickly helped Liam pick out snacks. Avoiding Daniel's curious gaze, that evening, as they sat down for dinner, Daniel kept glancing at her. He wasn't the type to pry, but something inside him stirred. She was hiding something, that much was clear. But then again, wasn't everyone hiding something? Dinner that night was simple pasta with tomato sauce. Emily insisted on helping, chopping vegetables while Liam told exaggerated stories about his soccer practice. And then I kicked the ball so hard, it almost went into space, Liam said proudly. Emily laughed, nearly dropping the knife. Into space? That's some serious talent. Daniel shook his head. Don't encourage him. But secretly, he was grateful. Emily had a way of turning even ordinary meals into something memorable. The way she listened to Liam, the way she teased Daniel gently when he added too much salt, it all made the house feel alive again. After dinner, while Liam went to his room to finish homework, Daniel stepped onto the porch for some air. To his surprise, Emily joined him, holding 2 mugs of tea. I made you one, she said. Handing him the cup, Daniel nodded his thanks. For a while, they sat in silence, the night air cool and calm. Finally, Daniel spoke. You're good with him, you know. Emily smiled softly. He's easy to be around, honest. Kids usually are. Daniel studied her for a moment. You know, you don't talk much about yourself. She looked down at her mug, her fingers tightening slightly around it. There's not much to say. Just a student trying to figure things out. Something in her tone told him there was more. But he let it go. He wasn't the type to push. He understood what it meant to carry things you weren't ready to share. As the night stretched on, Daniel found himself thinking of how quickly Emily had become part of their lives. She was supposed to just rent a room, but instead she was filling gaps he hadn't realized were so deep. Inside, Liam peeked out from behind the curtains, watching the 2 of them on the porch. He grinned to himself, already sensing something his father didn't yet see. Life in their small house was changing. Piece by piece, moment by moment, Emily was weaving herself into their story. And though her secret stayed hidden, it was only a matter of time before the truth would come knocking at their door. The autumn air grew cooler, and the small house seemed cozier with every passing day. Daniel found himself noticing how much had changed since Emily had moved in. The laughter in the evenings, the quiet hum of life that filled every corner. Things that had felt heavy before now seemed a little lighter. One Saturday morning, Daniel stood outside fixing a squeaky hinge on the back door while Liam and Emily were inside working on a school project. He could hear their voices drifting through the window, Liam's excited chatter and Emily's patient explanations. When he walked back in, he found the table covered in cardboard, markers, and glue sticks. Liam was proudly holding up a model of the solar system, though the planets were all slightly lopsided. Look, Dad, he shouted. Emily said Pluto doesn't count anymore, but I still put it in. Daniel chuckled. Good man. Don't let them tell you otherwise. Emily smiled at the boy's determination, but Daniel noticed her hands. They were delicate, the kind that didn't look like they had ever known hard labor. Yet she worked carefully with the glue, her sleeves rolled up, a smudge of marker on her cheek. She looked more like a teacher than a student in that moment. Later, when Liam ran off to wash his hands, Daniel leaned against the counter, watching her tidy the table. You're really good with him, he said again, this time more softly. She gave a small shrug. I like kids. They're simple. They don't care who you are, just how you treat them. Her words struck him. There it was again, that hint. Who you are. As if it mattered more in her world than it did here. That evening, Daniel went out to pick up groceries while Emily stayed home with Liam. When he returned, he walked through the front door to the sound of piano music. Surprised, he set the bags down quietly and stepped into the living room. Emily was seated at the old upright piano his late wife had once played. It had been untouched for years, collecting dust in the corner. Yet here was Emily, her fingers gliding effortlessly over the keys, filling the room with a melody so smooth it felt out of place in their modest home. Liam sat beside her, wide-eyed, as if witnessing magic. Daniel didn't interrupt. He leaned against the doorway, listening. Her playing wasn't just good, it was professional. The kind that came from years of practice and expensive lessons. When the song ended, Emily noticed him watching. Her cheeks flushed slightly. Sorry, she said quickly, pulling her hands away. I didn't mean to, don't apologize, Daniel said, his voice softer than he intended. That was beautiful. I didn't even know it still worked. Emily smiled faintly, but her eyes carried something unspoken. She looked like someone who had revealed too much over the next few days. Daniel found himself piecing things together. The way Emily never worried about money despite her simple lifestyle. The expensive books she occasionally read. The flawless piano playing. And of course, the phone call he had overheard at the grocery store. One evening, curiosity got the better of him. They were sitting in the living room after dinner, Liam asleep, and the air between them was comfortable but heavy with unasked questions. Daniel finally said, "Emily, why do I get the feeling you're not telling me everything?" She froze, her hands wrapped around her mug of tea. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a quiet voice, she replied, "Because I'm not." Daniel raised an eyebrow but stayed silent, letting her continue if she wanted to. Emily looked down at her mug, her voice low. "I didn't move here just for school. I needed space, away from expectations, away from people who only see me as something I didn't choose to be." Daniel tilted his head. "And what's that?" Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw the weight she carried. "My father. He's very well known. He owns businesses, properties, things I never cared about. To him, I'm his daughter, the millionaire's daughter. To everyone else, I'm privilege. But I didn't want that. I wanted to live like a normal person, to earn things on my own, even if it's small." Her words hung in the air like smoke. Daniel leaned back slowly. It explained everything. The piano, the card, the polished way she carried herself. He should have been angry that she'd kept this from him, but instead he felt a strange mix of emotions. "Why here?" he asked quietly. Emily gave a small smile. "Because this house felt real. When I first came here, I saw a father trying so hard for his son. I saw a place where love mattered more than money. I wanted that." For a long time, Daniel didn't speak. His mind spun, trying to process it all. A part of him felt tricked, but another part admired her honesty. Finally, he sighed. "Emily, I don't care who your father is. You're here now, and Liam, he adores you. Just promise me one thing: don't bring trouble to his world. He's been through enough." Her eyes softened. "I would never. I promise." That night, as Daniel lay in bed, he thought about everything she had said. He didn't know what it would mean for the future. But one thing was certain: the girl who had walked into his home as a tenant was far more complicated than he had imagined. And though she wanted to escape her world, Daniel knew secrets like hers didn't stay hidden forever. The days after Emily's confession felt different, though not in the way Daniel expected. Nothing outwardly changed. She still helped Liam with his homework, still cooked with Daniel when she could, still laughed at the little jokes that filled their evenings. But now, whenever Daniel looked at her, he couldn't help but remember her words. The millionaire's daughter. It echoed in his head sometimes when he least wanted it. He'd be tightening a bolt at the garage or scrubbing grease off his hands, and suddenly he'd see her in his mind, sitting at their table with that quiet smile. And he'd wonder how long before her world came knocking at their door. One evening, Liam came running into the kitchen holding something shiny in his hand. "Dad, look what I found in Emily's bag," he shouted excitedly. Before Daniel could scold him for snooping, he saw what Liam held: a watch. But not just any watch. It gleamed in the dim kitchen light, delicate and beautiful, clearly worth more than anything Daniel owned. Emily rushed in a second later, her face pale. "Liam, that's not a toy. Please give it back." The boy blinked, confused but obedient, handing it over. "Sorry, I didn't know." She smiled faintly, though her grip on the watch was tight. "It's okay, just be careful." Daniel studied her, catching the flicker of unease in her eyes. When Liam ran off, he asked quietly, "That watch, it's not exactly a student's thing, is it?" Emily hesitated, then shook her head. "It was a gift from my father. I don't wear it much, but I keep it because it's the only thing of his I feel connected to." Her honesty softened him, but the unease remained. That weekend, Daniel decided to take Liam to the park. Emily joined, sitting on the bench with a book while Daniel and Liam kicked a ball around. The late afternoon sun painted the sky orange, and laughter carried through the air. For a moment, life felt normal, almost perfect, until a black car pulled up at the edge of the park. Daniel didn't notice at first, focused on Liam, but Emily did. Her body stiffened, her book lowering slowly. Two men in suits stepped out, scanning the area before their eyes landed on her. Panic flashed across her face. She stood abruptly, her voice low but firm. "Daniel, we need to go, now." He frowned, confused. "What's wrong?" She grabbed Liam's hand, pulling him close. "Please, just trust me." The men approached calmly, their footsteps steady. One of them called out, "Miss Emily, your father is worried. He asked us to bring you home." Daniel's chest tightened. He looked at her, then at the men. Everything clicked into place. This wasn't just a story, this was her reality. Standing right in front of them. Emily shook her head, her voice trembling but firm. "I told him I don't want that life. I'm not going back." The taller man sighed, as if rehearsed. "It's not safe for you here." Daniel stepped forward instinctively, placing himself between them and Emily. She said no. "You heard her." The men exchanged looks, then one of them pulled out a phone. "We'll let him know where you are. He'll decide what happens next." Emily's grip on Liam tightened. Daniel could feel her shaking. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, without another word, the men returned to the car and drove off. The silence that followed was heavy. Liam looked up at his dad, wide-eyed. "Who were those guys?" Daniel crouched down, trying to steady his voice. "Just people who think they know what's best. But don't worry, buddy. You're safe." Emily's eyes glistened as she whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't want this to touch your lives." On the walk home, no one spoke much. Liam clutched Emily's hand tightly, sensing more than he understood. Daniel walked beside them, his jaw set, his thoughts tangled. Back at the house, when Liam finally drifted to sleep, Daniel sat across from Emily at the table. "Emily," he said quietly, "you need to tell me everything. No more half-truths." She nodded, her shoulders slumping. "My father doesn't understand. To him, money solves everything. He thinks he can send people, control where I live, who I see. That's why I left. I didn't want to be managed like a business deal." Daniel rubbed his face, tired but focused. "And now, they know where you are. What does that mean for us?" Her voice cracked. "It means he'll keep trying, until he gets what he wants." Daniel's heart sank. For years, he'd fought to protect his son from the harshness of the world. Now, for the first time, he felt that threat wasn't just financial or emotional, it was real. But when he looked at Emily, her face pale with guilt, he couldn't find anger. Instead, he saw someone just as lost, just as desperate for freedom as he was. "You're not alone," he said finally, his voice steady. "We'll figure this out together." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, clutching her watch tightly as if it were both a reminder of her past and a chain she longed to break. That night, as Daniel checked on Liam, who slept peacefully, he stood in the doorway for a long while. He thought about the two worlds colliding, his simple, hard-working life and Emily's hidden world of wealth and power. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was clear: life would never be the same again. The tension in the house lingered like a storm waiting to break. Even though the men in suits hadn't returned, Daniel could feel the shadow of their presence everywhere. When he walked Liam to school, he caught himself glancing over his shoulder. When he worked at the garage, he worried about who might show up at the door. Emily tried to carry on as usual. She still cooked, studied, and played with Liam. But Daniel could see it in her eyes, she was bracing for something. Every time her phone buzzed, she tensed. Every time a car slowed near the house, she froze. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the living room in orange light, the doorbell rang. Daniel's chest tightened. He opened the door slowly, only to find a man he recognized instantly, not from real life, but from television, newspapers, and headlines. A man whose face carried power and wealth in equal measure. Emily's father. The older man stood tall, his suit sharp, his expression unreadable. Behind him, a sleek black car idled by the curb. "Mr. Daniels?" the man asked in a voice both polite and commanding. Daniel nodded stiffly. "Yes, I'd like to speak with my daughter. May I come in?" Before Daniel could answer, Emily appeared at the hallway entrance. Her breath caught, and her face paled. "Dad." Her father's expression softened just slightly. "Emily, I've been worried." Emily shook her head, her voice trembling. "You sent men after me. That's not worry. That's control." The man sighed and stepped inside, ignoring Daniel's subtle attempt to block the doorway. His eyes moved around the modest living room, the old furniture, the worn carpet. His tailored presence looked out of place here, like royalty stepping into a cottage. "I don't understand," he said finally, turning back to her. "Why would you choose this life? You've had everything handed to you: comfort, security, opportunity, and you trade it for." His gaze flicked to Daniel, then back to Emily. "This?" Daniel clenched his jaw but stayed quiet. Emily straightened her shoulders, her voice steadier now. "Because this feels real. Because I'm more than just your daughter. I wanted to live, not be protected like glass." Her father's brows furrowed. "You think this is living? Struggling to pay rent, eating cheap dinners, worrying about tomorrow?" Daniel stepped forward then, his voice calm but firm. "Struggling doesn't mean unhappy. It means working for something, earning it. That's something money can't buy." The older man studied him, a faint look of surprise crossing his face. "And you? What role do you play in this? A single father, barely keeping his head above water. What can you possibly give her?" Daniel met his gaze without flinching. "Respect, honesty, a home that doesn't care about money or status. That's more than she's been given with all your wealth, isn't it?" The silence that followed was heavy. Emily's father looked between them, his jaw tightening. Emily stepped closer to Daniel, her voice low but strong. "He's right. For once, I feel like I belong. Not because of a last name, not because of money, but because I'm seen as me." Her father's shoulders dropped slightly. For a moment, the steel in his eyes softened, replaced by something else: worry, perhaps even regret. But it didn't last. "You're still young," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You don't understand what it means to walk away from this family. From me." Emily's lips trembled. "I understand more than you think. And I'm not walking away from family. I'm walking away from control." Liam, who had been listening from the hallway, suddenly piped up. His voice was small but clear. "She's happy here." All three adults turned to see him clutching his toy car, his eyes wide. "Emily helps me with homework. She makes the best pancakes. She laughs at my jokes. She's family already." The innocence in his words cut through the tension like nothing else could. Emily's eyes welled with tears. Daniel placed a hand on his son's shoulder, steadying him. Emily's father looked at the boy, then at his daughter, and finally at Daniel. His jaw worked, but for once, no words came immediately. Finally, he sighed. "Emily, I can't force you. I never should have tried. But know this: the world isn't kind. One day, you'll realize what you've left behind." Emily stepped forward, her voice softer now. "Maybe, but right now, this is where I need to be." He studied her for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "If this is truly your choice, then I'll respect it. For now." With that, he turned and walked to the door, his presence leaving the house colder as he stepped outside. The car door shut, and within seconds, the sleek black vehicle disappeared down the street. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily let out a shaky breath and sank onto the couch, her hands trembling. Daniel sat beside her, unsure of what to say. Finally, Emily whispered, "I thought he'd never let go." Daniel glanced at her, then at Liam, who leaned against Emily's arm as if he'd always belonged there. "Maybe he didn't let go," Daniel said. "Maybe he just realized you've already chosen." Emily smiled faintly, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I guess I have." That night, the house felt different. The storm had broken, but its echoes lingered. Emily's secret was no longer hidden, and though her father had left, his shadow remained. Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one truth settled in his heart. Their lives were no longer ordinary. They were entangled now, bound by something stronger than rent agreements or chance. And though the world outside might not approve, inside their little home, they were starting to feel like a family. The house felt strangely quiet after Emily's father left. The black car had disappeared into the night, but his presence lingered like a ghost in the corners of the room. Emily sat on the couch with her hands clasped tightly, as if holding herself together. Daniel stood by the window, staring out at the street even though there was nothing left to see. Liam broke the silence first. "Is he coming back?" he asked in a small voice. Emily pulled him close and shook her head. "Not tonight. Maybe not for a while." She kissed the top of his hair and whispered, "You're safe." The boy nodded, satisfied, and soon wandered off to his room, leaving Daniel and Emily alone with the weight of unspoken words. Daniel finally turned from the window and sat down across from her. So he said softly, "What now?" Emily let out a shaky laugh. "That's the question I've been asking myself since I left home." She leaned back against the couch, her eyes distant. "I don't know if he'll really let go. But for now, he gave me space. And that's more than I had before." Daniel studied her face, the exhaustion in her eyes, the strength in her posture. She was young, yes, but there was a depth to her, a resilience forged by walking away from comfort in search of truth. "You know," Daniel said slowly, "when you first knocked on this door, I thought you'd be gone in a month. Students come and go. Renters never stay. But somehow," he trailed off, searching for the right words. Emily finished them for him. "Somehow I stayed." They both smiled faintly. Over the next few days, life began to find its rhythm again. Daniel returned to the garage, Liam to school, Emily to her classes. But the air between them was different, lighter, more open. The secret was no longer hanging between them, and though the future was uncertain, there was a shared sense of belonging that none of them wanted to lose. One Saturday morning, Daniel woke to the smell of pancakes. He stumbled into the kitchen to find Emily at the stove, Liam standing on a chair beside her, proudly pouring too much syrup onto a plate. "Good morning," Liam shouted with a grin. Emily turned with a spatula in her hand. "We're making breakfast today." "Sit down," Daniel chuckled and obeyed, watching as the two of them bustled around the kitchen like they had done it 100 times before. For a brief moment, he imagined this scene not as something temporary, but as something permanent. A family. After breakfast, they went to the park again. The autumn leaves crunched under their feet, and Liam darted ahead with his soccer ball. Daniel and Emily walked side by side, their steps easy, the tension of the past week slowly fading. "You know," Emily said quietly, "I used to think happiness was something my father could buy. Big houses, fancy trips, clothes that cost more than some people make in a month. But sitting here, watching Liam laugh, eating pancakes in a small kitchen, this feels like the happiness I was searching for." Daniel glanced at her, his voice low. "Money can build walls, but it can't build a home." She looked at him then, and for a long moment, their eyes held. There was no need for words, everything was already understood. As the weeks turned into months, the pattern of their lives deepened. Emily's father sent the occasional message through formal channels, reminding her of what she was walking away from, but he didn't appear again at their door. Slowly, Emily began to believe he might truly let her choose her own path. One evening, as winter crept closer, Daniel came home to find Emily helping Liam decorate a small Christmas tree in the corner of the living room. The boy was humming a carol, hanging ornaments clumsily, while Emily steadied the branches. Daniel paused in the doorway, his chest tight with an emotion he hadn't let himself feel in years. It wasn't just gratitude. It wasn't just relief. It was something deeper, a sense of family, of love, of possibility. When Liam finally went to bed, Daniel sat across from Emily at the glowing tree. "You've changed this house," he said simply. She tilted her head. "For better or worse?" He smiled faintly. "For better. Much better." Emily's eyes softened. "You've changed me too, Daniel. I came here running away from who I was. I thought I'd just find a roof, some space, maybe a little freedom. Instead, I found something I didn't even know I needed." She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I found a family." The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was warm, steady, like the soft glow of the tree beside them. For Daniel, the journey of struggling bills and long nights had led to something he hadn't expected. For Emily, the journey of breaking free from wealth had led to something priceless. And for Liam, the little boy who had lost too much too soon, the journey had given him back laughter, warmth, and a mother figure he hadn't dared to hope for. The story that had started with a simple ad for a spare room had become something else entirely. A new beginning, A second chance. As the night settled around them, Daniel leaned back, his eyes drifting to the window where snowflakes had begun to fall softly against the glass. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel so heavy. Because no matter what challenges lay ahead, they weren't facing them alone. They were facing them as something stronger, something rare. A family not bound by blood or wealth, but by love, trust, and the simple choice to stay.